End of year overwhelm can be a very real thing for many people, with a multitude of requests and demands on their time, with work deadlines looming and projects have got to be done before the end of the year. There's a pressure to look good, to be saying yes to all the social invites that you may be getting. There may be the opposite of you being, or people perceiving that they are missing out on things, and a sense of loneliness going on. But you got to stay happy. You got to be joyful. You got to be having a wonderful time, because it's the most wonderful time of the year, or so we're told. But that often leads to high levels of exhaustion, people feeling run down, whether that's physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. That overwhelm can really take on an intensity which can lead to upset and even illness. So what I want to talk about in today's episode of Coming to Your Senses is how we can look at that end of year overwhelm and ways that we can build emotional resilience, not only for the festive season, but at all times of the year. What I want to do in this episode is look at some of the habits that we've got that, without realizing, could be really unhelpful. We've been so conditioned into them, they are habitual, that we just don't realize the impact, or we don't take the time to think that we could do something else. So I also want to offer out some suggestions about things that could be helpful, so that you have got another direction of travel and ways for you to be able to build up that resilience. Resilience is not something that somebody else can give you. It doesn't matter how great I am as a coach. It doesn't matter how great your partner is, actually, or your best friends or your parents are. You've got to build this for yourself. And the best way to be able to do it is start to look at, very simply, what's working for you, what's not, and what you could do differently. And that's what I want to share with you today. So I have a confession to make. Let's be very honest here. I know that, oh my gosh, probably was my late teens, early 20s was the last time I had what could be classed as a quote unquote normal / usual Christmas, because I worked in the wonderful world of theatre. I don't mean the cutting people up and fixing people in that way. I mean the jazz hands, glitter, and if you're in the UK, pantomime season. Yes, there are certain songs that if they're played, I still twitch at, even though I left the industry more than 20 years ago, because of pantomimes and the amount of times that I heard certain records. Don't play the Macarena near me or any of those kinds of things, because I will start to twitch. But what I know is, because I worked in that world, which meant that I most of the time only really had Christmas Day off, and Christmas Eve was usually spent traveling somewhere. And then I had to get back very early on Boxing Day morning somewhere, because we had 2, sometimes 3 shows. Is that I have a different view. I have a different model of what the festive time looks like. I have a completely different paradigm to most people around Christmas. And I think that that's what happens for a lot of us, is that we get stuck in a worldview, that we think that that's the right worldview, when actually it's just a worldview. And that we can all look at that model of the world and say, does that work for me? Is that what I would really like? Is that feeding me? Is it helping me? Is it supporting me and those around me? And I think that we can all get stuck in various paradigms, whether it's the 9 to 5, that's, you have to work 9 to 5, that's the way that it works. Or you retire at a certain age, or you go through education to a certain point. We can all get really stuck in that way of thinking. But I think that what's most helpful for us, and especially if we want to look at influencing things to be more in alignment with who we are, not to the exclusion of other people. I have a mantra which is, be authentic to self and considerate to others. And I think that that's really stood me in good stead to work out how I would really like things to be. And I want to put others in the mix with that. So I spend the festive period in the way that I would like to, which is sometime with my family, sometime on my own, and with my dog as well, and sometimes with friends. And very much it's about going out to places in nature. I often do a lot of reading. I often do a lot of reflection and painting. But I also want to spend time with those people that I really enjoy spending time with as well. But I shifted that paradigm not only when I left the theatre, but when I really started to recognize, and this sounds so obvious and yet so few people do it, which is, oh, I can do this the way that I want to. And I think very often we collectively get caught in this is what we should be doing. But it was quite a few years ago now when somebody said to me, but you do realize that nature doesn't know that it's Monday. Therefore, if nature doesn't know that it's Monday, then nature doesn't know that it's Christmas Day either. So therefore, it's man-made construction. And genuinely, I think I was in my 30s when I heard that. And I genuinely not thought about that before. I'd never really recognized how constructed this world is that we're living in. And therefore, that means that we can construct something that is more suitable and appropriate for us. If you've listened to the first episode of Coming to Your Senses, you'll know that in the early 2000s, I experienced a breakdown. I tried different therapies, but it was coaching that truly helped me transform my life. Initially, when I discovered coaching, though, I couldn't afford it. And it was a kind soul who sponsored me not only to have coaching, but also to train and become a coach. And my promise to them was that I would pay it forward. And I've done that in many ways over the years, initially through social media and private Facebook group called Confidence Revolution, and also through Coming to Your Senses, the podcast. But it triggered for me a passion to really want to make and create a secure, supportive space for people to be able to come together and have conversations that transform their lives. So I created the Conscious Conversations community. It's a group where we meet on more than once a month, and we have a focused theme which is guided by the community and facilitated by me. There's hundreds of hours of learning and resources and materials to help you transform your life in a like-minded space. Because I get passionate about it and because this was my promise to pay it forward, I'm offering you the opportunity to trial it for £1 for the first month. If that appeals to you, then head to juleswyman.online/conscious conversations offer. juleswyman.online/conscious conversations offer to explore what's available for you through being part of a conscious community. So that's my first thing to suggest, is look at all of the ways that you're perceiving this time of year of what you should. And I think shoulds are a good clue that something needs to be addressed. Should is a word that roots back in an Anglo-Saxon word that was spelled S-C-O-L-D, scold. And I think there's a clue there into how we use the word and how it's often used in this time of our being. And should, to me, very often relates to somebody else's goal, whether that is a specific person or whether that is a cultural, you should be out having fun because it's Christmas, or you should be getting drunk, or I heard two ladies in the changing room in the gym yesterday talking about all of the baking that you should be doing because it's because it's Christmas, and that we should be eating because, it's Christmas. And I find that very interesting. And that's not a judgment of these ladies. That's just a recognition of how much we can get caught in a paradigm of shoulds. So my invitation to you, if you can, is to take a step back and go, hang on a second. What I've got set up or how things are going to be, and you may not be able to do it this year, but certainly you can start thinking about it for next year, is have the conversation with yourself and anyone else involved as to what is it that you want, what works for you, what's going to be the most resourceful, helpful, authentic to you and considerate of others way of doing this festive period that you really can. And a way of being able to do that is start to look at what are you saying yes to or no to automatically without even checking. And start to look, do I want to say yes to that? And if I do want to say yes to that, if I say yes to that, what am I saying no to? And vice versa. If I'm saying no to that thing, then what am I saying yes to instead? Very often we will say yes or no without looking at what the counterpoint is, so that even if it's just for ourselves, we don't have to tell the other person. It is knowing why we're saying yes or no. And it's because we've got something else, we've got some other purpose or reason. Because if I say yes to that social thing, then I know that I'm saying no to a bit of rest, for example. And actually, that's perfectly fine. I'm okay with that. Equally, I might be saying no to that social thing because I've had such a full-on week. There's been a lot of demands. I've been out every single night. I'm going to say no to that one because actually what I need is a bit of downtime. There's not a right or wrong way because it's your way. And that's where the be authentic to you and considerate to others is really important. I know for some people that going out and being out with people all the time actually lights them up. They feel great, and they really enjoy it. But equally, there's others that really enjoy being sat on the sofa with a good book, and that lights them up. So that's why there's no right or wrong way. But it is about you checking for yourself. The unhelpful habit is by saying yes or no without even thinking about it. Doing things out of obligation, doing things that we are shoulding into our lives. And sometimes it can take a bit of stepping back. It may not be an immediate thing that you can cut off from and go, no, don't want to do that because I'm saying yes to myself in this instance. But it is important to start looking at that for yourself. It is important to recognize that. And I know maybe we should do another episode about FOMO, but I think it's important for you to start looking at, and this is a question that I asked myself a couple of years ago when I was really ill. It was more than a couple of years ago now. So that I could start taking care of myself from a physical, mental, emotional, spiritual perspective. And that's what actually recharges your batteries. What actually recharges your batteries, not what you think or not what some self-help guru has told you, but what recharges your batteries. And it's really important to start looking at that and also look at what are you already doing in your everyday life that recharges your batteries. I know, for example, that for me, having a sleep routine really helps to recharge my batteries. So I go to bed at pretty much the same time, give or take half an hour every single day, and pretty much wake up, may not always get up, but I pretty much always wake up at give or take half an hour at roughly the same time. Now, it took me years to get into that habit, but now I've established that habit. I know that really benefits me to help recharge my batteries. It's unhelpful when I'm taken out of that for whatever reason, and it has like a jet lag impact on my life. But actually, I think that what we want to start looking at is what are we already doing, as well as what aren't we doing. So one of the things, and I was reflecting on this because of the conversation that I overheard in the changing room with these two ladies. And what struck me was how much they were talking about, and one of them even actually said, well, it is the most gluttonous time of the year. And I thought, yeah, but why? Why are we doing that to ourselves? Not as a criticism of her, just genuinely. Why, if I was invited away for a weekend, I wouldn't go to my wardrobe and get every single item of clothing and shove it into my suitcase. And I wouldn't get all of my shoes and shove them in there. If I'm going to be away for a weekend, that's way too much. And I'm probably going to be like trying to push down the lid of my suitcase. It's going to be bulging at the seams. It's going to be heavy and uncomfortable. And there's too much. There's just too much there. Taking the time to think about, well, what would be really helpful for me to take that weekend? I may still pack one or two extra things, but it's not going to be too much. It's not going to be overwhelming. And I think that's the thing, that unless we stop and go, what's actually going to recharge me? Now, all of you listening to this are going to have different working hours. You're going to have different demands on your time, be that from a family perspective, be that from a work perspective. But I know that we can all take the time to look at, well, what genuinely recharges my batteries? When we take that time and even create a list of things, whether that is walking, running, reading, singing, dancing, painting, playing a musical instrument, being out in nature, time with family, time on your own, time with animals, going to the gym, watching a movie. There are so many things and there's so many different possibilities, and it's not a one size fits all, and not a one size fits all every time either. But there are some things. I love a good spa day. It was a lovely way to recharge, but I can't do that every day. So it's about looking at all of those different little things. And when you've got a list to hand, when you've got that overwhelm, you can see what can slot in there to help recharge your batteries. Overwhelm to me is that it's overthinking. It's thinking that is assuming that I can't do all of this in one go. And none of us can. None of us, as the analogy says, you can't eat a whole elephant or big chunk of broccoli if you are a vegetarian. You can't do them all in one go. You've got to break it down, and you can only do what's right in front of you with the battery life that you've got in that moment. You don't want to be running on empty and running on fumes. So the way to build your resilience, especially from a physical perspective, is look at ways that you can recharge. Now, from an emotional perspective, the way that you can recharge is by taking the time to think about how are you describing the situation that you're in. Shouldn't have said yes to this. This is ridiculous. Why am I here? I don't want to be here. This is horrible. I hate it. This is not fun. I bet everyone else is having fun. I bet everyone else is having the best time ever. All of that kind of thinking, and believe me, I've engaged with that kind of thinking before. And I know that for me, that led me to nothing but misery and upset and a sense of aloneness or sadness. I could carry on. The depressive thoughts that take us, it's an unhelpful habit that we can, without realizing, get hooked into. I am where I am right now. So what can I see? What can I hear? What can I feel right now that actually I do like? And that may be something about you. It may be about somebody else. It may be about the room that you're in. It might be about the food that you're eating, the drink that you've got. By focusing your attention, by giving your thinking something that's far more helpful to look at. This isn't about being positive, by the way. This is about being helpful. So at this moment, I have still got the tail end of a cold. I broke a tooth at the weekend, which I haven't had the chance to get to the dentist to get fixed. If I let it run off on about how my voice might sound on this podcast because of the cold, and am I sounding differently because of the gap I've got in my mouth, the little odd sensations that I'm getting there, if I get distracted in that sense, then I'm going to start to have emotional thinking, which is not helpful. But if I can just stay thinking about what it is that I'm thinking about, and thinking about that I get to do these podcasts and share them with amazing people who listen to it that look to make changes with their lives, then that's really cool. That's a really cool thing for me to do. And I'm extremely grateful for that. So by shifting your thinking into where are you right now and what do you like? You don't even have to love it. You don't have to be, oh my God, it's awesome, amazing, and brilliant. But just find something that you really like. It might be the color of your eyes. It might be your hair. It might be the top that you're wearing. It could be anything. But just find something and give it your attention. It might be listening to this podcast. It might be the color of the microphone if you're watching it. It might be the painting on the wall. I could keep going on. There are so many different things that you could give your attention to that would be more helpful. And it's not about putting your thinking in a way so that you become this bright and shiny and everything's rosy and positive. To me, actually, it would be far more helpful for you to be in a neutral state rather than trying to be that jolly, amazing, everything's brilliant, isn't it the most wonderful time of the year? Because ultimately, it might not be. And sometimes, as well as having that list of what it is that recharges your batteries, have a list of that thinking too, because having a question like, what do I love that's around me right now? What can I see that I really like, can be a very helpful thing. Now, I asked this question on my membership, my Conscious Conversations membership. What is it that recharges your battery? What are the things that you do that already are you taking care of yourself? And the thing that I found fascinating about that was just the amount of different things, and also the simple things. And it was the simple things, like one person said, singing at the top of her voice with no one around, because she's like, I haven't got a great voice, but what she loves is choral and gospel choirs. And she's like, I love singing those. And just doing one of those really recharges my batteries. Doesn't cost anything. It's there. Another person said about spending time in nature. And she said, do you know what? There are some times I haven't got the time to go outside for a walk. So I just need to make sure that at some point during the day, I'm at least looking out of my window and taking the time to absorb the nature that I can with where I'm living. Another person was saying, it's just about making sure that I've got a few things booked in so that it makes my life easier. And she was talking about like hair and getting her nails done and various things like that, getting them booked in. And then that takes away the thinking and having to remember about getting those things all sorted. When it may sound a bit laborious and a bit obvious to really make these lists, but by making them, it means that when we're at that low ebb, we don't have to come up with a solution and think about it, because we've got the list. So whether that's on our phone or whether you write it in your journal, however you choose to record it, you've got that list that you can just go to and go, which of these would be the most helpful thing for me to do right now? What is really going to help me? And what it enables us to do then is just take some time, whether that's 5 minutes. I love doodling. It's one of the things I love doing. So Zentangle is something I love. And there's also a series of books that it's about 5 or 6 different books that I read every year. And I now have them all on audio. So I combine the two things. And even if it's just for 10 minutes, listening to 10 minutes of an audiobook whilst I'm doing 10 minutes of Zentangle, actually, I really love it. It just gives me an opportunity to just go. And that leads me on to the final thing that I want to share with you that can make a big difference during this festive period. So many of us get caught up in rushing from one thing to the next with this demand, and I've got to get that done, and I must remember to do this, that actually we forget to properly breathe. Very often, interestingly enough, at the start of the live calls on the Conscious Conversations, we just sit for a few minutes, and I invite people to take some deep breaths in their own time. And so often I notice it for myself, but I can also, because I can see the community members on camera, is that I can see just these shoulders just drop down a little bit, that they just come into being. And I often notice that the tone of my voice drops. By taking those moments, and especially if you are in those situations where you're being pulled left, right, and centre, and you're having to do things that maybe if you'd rather be under the duvet than out doing something, is that taking the time to do some nice, slow, deep breaths is a really helpful thing, because it relaxes your nervous system. Most of the time, what we don't realize is we're running on cortisol, we're running on this stress, and it's not being displaced anywhere. So it builds up, which is why then a lot of people become poorly at that, and the overeating and over drinking. But by taking some time, as many times as you can, to just take some nice deep breaths, preferably in and out through your nose, if not in through your nose and out through your mouth. If both of those are a struggle, as it was for me with the cold, breathing in and out through the mouth, if that's the only option that you've got. But taking the time to really take some deep breaths. Now, you can just do that in your own pace. Do it 3 times. And each time you inhale, make it just a little bit longer. And each time that you exhale, make it a little bit longer. The aim is that your exhale is to be longer than your inhale, if that's what you're going to be doing, is that kind of breathing. The other kind of breathing that I've taught to many people over the years. I can't even remember where I originally learnt it, but one of my friends, she always just turns to me and goes, "Box breathing, savior, absolute savior." And she works in a high level stressed environment, and she has taught this to clients. She's taught it to her staff to just remind them to just slow down before you go into something else, especially if you're getting that sense of overwhelm. And what it does on many levels is enable you to slow down, trigger that parasympathetic nervous system, enable your body to go into a state of relaxation, which will then help you access even more resilience within your body. So box breathing is where you take a count. In this instance, I'm going to do 4, where you draw a box. So you count for 4 to do the top line, and that's an in breath. And then you hold on the side line as you're drawing down, same number, 4, and hold the breath. And then you exhale on the bottom line again, count of 4. And then you hold again on the other side line again for the count of 4. So it's breathing in and hold, 2, 3, 4, and exhale and hold. And doing that again 3 times. Now, I always say do it 3 times. You can do it more as long as you are making sure that you're not getting yourself into a state of hyperventilation, which can happen if you're doing too many of those. But just taking that kind of breath just gives you an opportunity to really relax down and step away, even momentarily, from a potentially demanding, overwhelming situation. And a great place to do that is the bathroom, because you can shut the door, lock the door, and escape for a few minutes. If you can go and stand outside and do it, but just take a step away. As I said, I used to work in theatre, and it was a very, at times, very stressful place to be, especially at this time of year, because people did want to be around their families, and often they struggled to do that. So without realizing I was doing it at the time, I used to stand, especially with actors who were stressing, and I'd just get them to talk to me, but we'd be doing some deep breathing to get them to calm down before they would then be going on stage. I find it very interesting that we don't take these simple things of challenging the paradigm and really starting to say yes and no to things that align with us, to look at what's really working for us so that we can look to recharge our batteries rather than being stuck in the old paradigm, and also giving ourselves the opportunity to look for what is rather than what isn't, and then take some lovely breaths that can help and establish us in a way that is far more resourceful as well as resilient. There's no reason for us to go sliding and crashing into this festive period and feeling just completely depleted. Why not go through it and feel like you're recharging as you go along? So my invitation, if you choose to accept it, is to look at 5 to 10 minutes, 15 if you want to push it, every day, that you can do that can help recharge you, that can really help you build your resilience so that you're feeling even more emotionally strong, physically strong, and absolutely more resilient as you go into a next year. And I look forward to seeing you again on another episode of Coming to Your Senses.